So Team Reilly is now working on Gov 2.0, right? Can you tell us why did you invest in such idea and what your expectations are from this project?
Well, first off, I often get involved in new ideas because I'm following, not leading. And what I saw was that many of the people who I call alpha geeks, just hackers, were working with government data. And I started saying, oh, something interesting happening over there. So I got involved and I started talking to people about how we needed to rethink the role of government. And what I came up with was the notion that we have an opportunity to learn from the kinds of platforms that we've seen in technology, whether it's the web or the iPhone more recently, to re-envision the role of government to be more like a platform. You know, if you think how mobile phones used to work, that's a lot of the way government works today. You know, a few people get in a back room, they figure out the features, and that's all you got. Apple changed the rules of the game when they turned the iPhone into a platform. All of a sudden, you have hundreds of thousands of applications that the phone manufacturers would never put on offer. And I think that's what we need to do with government as we go forward. We need government to start investing in platform capabilities, like open data, for starters. But whatever they do, thinking about how do we open our services so that the private sector can then build on it. A really great example are GPS satellites. They were originally built by the US military. They made a decision to open them up for civilian use, and as a result we have maps and directions on our phones, services like Foursquare, Yelp, and the like that are able to pinpoint location and offer information tailored to where you are. The government would never have done that.
So you mean that we are close to have applications on our mobile phones in a few years so as that we can control the deficit or the fiscal policy of our country?
I do think that if government does less and gets more, we'll start to address those problems. Right now we have a model in which people try to make government do everything, or in the US they try to slash it and say it should do nothing. And my argument is in the middle. It says, no, no, government should invest in things that are hard, that we want to do together, and that the rest of society can build on. And if you think very hard about what are those things that will turn government into a better platform, you can actually spend less on government and get more benefit. You know, if you think again about how successful Apple became, it's not the cheapest phone, it's just better than what went before. And John Polka, who started an organization called Code for America, said, what if we felt about government the way we feel about our iPhone? You know, we'd be willing to pay our taxes because we felt like we were getting something for it. And it's really how do we get government to be useful enough and so visibly useful enough that we're happy to pay for it. Because one of the problems, and I understand this is a pretty serious problem here in Greece, people don't want to pay for the services they get. And part of the reason they don't want to do that is because government does things often quite badly.
And now that you're talking about Greek government, can you explain to us how this Gov 2.0 can be applied in Greece, because that's where our economic crisis started from. It was due to lack of fiscal policy.
Yeah.
So if everything can be controlled by citizens, do you think it would be better, or do you think that we wouldn't start up into this kind of financial debt?
No, I guess it's not simple. But I think the first thing that has to happen is that people have to rediscover some faith in government. And that has to come from both sides. You know, the problem so many times is that once things go bad, it's very hard to get them back on the right track. Government doesn't have the funds to do better, and people don't want to give government the funds because they don't see how it could do better. But it's important to remember, and again, I point to Apple. Apple was on its deathbed when Steve Jobs came back and reinvented it. And I think what we need is leadership that will say, let's throw away a lot of what's not working in government. Let's start over. Let's build a new platform for citizen participation, for more than citizen participation. I don't just mean, let's get citizens to give feedback to the same old tired politicians. I mean, how do we rethink the role of government more fundamentally so that we can build government services that surprise and delight citizens and make them happy to rejoin that compact of shared activity that government really represents?
It would be more trust.
Yes, more trust is absolutely central, and it starts by having someone in a leadership position who has vision. Steve Jobs came back into a dying company, but he had a vision of what could be done, and he reshaped that company and basically brought the customers along with him. And we need leadership that will bring citizens along with them to embrace government again and its role in society.
But can you tell us a more specific example how in the future this Gov 2.0 can be applied in Greek public sector?
Well, first of all, I will say I'm certainly not an expert on Greek public sector, but I would think that a huge part of the problem is you have a lot of people who are used to taking from the government but not giving very much. Whether it's public sector pensions, whether it's just things that are costing too much. We really need, I think, to change the game in terms of people's expectations of what they get from government and what it costs to perform the services that we actually want from government. People do want things like the trash to be picked up, the streets to be repaired, the power to work. And anyone who's lived in a country where those things are fundamentally broken knows that government plays a pretty important role. And yet, if we're not willing to pay for those things, we have a problem. But it really does start by pretty thorough house cleaning. I think the most important thing, is to start fresh. When Steve Jobs came back to Apple, he said, we've got hundreds of products, we're going to cut it down to 3. And I think in a similar way, so much of what we have in government today needs to be swept away.
And it's easier to control it.
Yes, right. Start fresh. What do we really need for the people? What do we really need for the better operation of society? And you start there, and then you ask yourself, what's the least that we can do, not the most that we can do? And how do we, in particular, how do we build services that allow private sector to innovate?
So, seeing the deals like ACTA, SOPAM, and BIPA coming very close to become laws, what is your opinion about the government intervention on the internet or other surveillance it has and the power it has on it? Should we make some concessions or to have everything open for the citizens and for the people and for everything who works on the internet?
What we see with laws like the Stop Online Piracy Act, the Protect IP Act, and ACTA are just, I think they're a terrible example of what is wrong with government. There's a concept of what they call regulatory capture. That is, incumbents, big companies with existing interests basically try to use government to protect their business. The internet has come along and provided new business models, often very effective new business models, that will eventually reshape the media landscape. And yet the existing companies are asking for laws to protect their businesses. That's exactly what government should not be doing. Government should be staying out of that, or if anything, tilting the laws in favor of the new opportunities. Just to give you a simple example, if you look at YouTube, major pop stars are now making more money on YouTube than they're making, for example, through iTunes. They're making more money from iTunes than they're making from their old record companies. Because Google auto-detects use of the music in videos uploaded by fans. If somebody puts up their wedding video with a pop song, Google detects that and runs ads against it for the benefit not of the person who posted the video, but for the artist. And so there's this new economic model that's coming along that actually does reward the rights holders. And yet the incumbents are trying to stop that kind of innovation. And I really think we need to reinvent the creative economy. You see new things like Kickstarter, which are doing that. People are, there's an immense reinvention of the media landscape. And the last thing we need to do is have government come down on the side of the old media.
What would you propose to a startupper and a new businessman that would like to fulfill his goals?
You know, the thing that I always advise anyone starting a business is to find real needs. You know, the fact is, in a country like Greece, clearly there are lots of things that need to be done. You know, we have this notion somehow of the quick fix, you know, or that somehow innovation has to do with, you know, high-tech startups and venture capital, and nothing can be farther from the truth. Innovation starts simply by looking around you and asking, hey, what needs doing? What will make people happier, more capable, better? How can I improve the world around me? You know, when I started my business, I didn't have any, you know, outside capital. I just said, wow, look, the documentation for these, you know, programs is lousy. Let's write some books. And, you know, we were able to get people to pay for them because we correctly identified a need. And so I just say, be true to who you are and what you see around you, and stop copying what someone else did. I would start by telling it to the people right around you. Don't think that you somehow have to go find something somewhere else. I think entrepreneurship is an attitude as much as anything. I remember there was a very bad recession in the United States, you know, in the 1980s. And I remember looking out my window and an old Italian man who lived next door. He was retired, but he was working in his backyard for, you know, a couple of days. And he was making, it turned out he was making a pedal-powered grindstone. And he finished building it, and then he sat down and he started making wooden spoons. And I thought, that's entrepreneurship. You know, he doesn't have the concept of being out of work. He just finds something to do that's worth doing. Now, that's a very humble example, but that always inspired me in my business, which I was just starting at the time. That notion of just find something useful to do. I got started in my book publishing business, which ended up making my fortune, because I was doing documentation consulting, and I happened to notice that there was no good documentation for you know, some programs that we were using. Nobody paid us to do that. You know, we were normally, you know, we had clients who would pay us, and we just said, well, when we have free time, let's write books that might be useful. And over time, we figured out that they were useful, and the people would pay us for them. But in the beginning, it was really just an attempt to be useful. And it took years before they took off. And you know, when I started my conference business, I was just like, wow, this community needs a place to gather. I didn't know whether it would be a successful business. I was, again, just trying to do something that was useful for the community that I was a part of. And I think that's a great example of what you're doing here with the Ignite. You know, it's not right now a money-making enterprise, but it's quite clear that you can help to build the visibility and career of the people who are coming in to present. You're starting to get experience in putting on events. You may actually be able to turn that into something, but it's because you're following the notion that, hey, this would be useful. Just start there.